all tell me, as I already discussed that there are various patterns of lung carcinoma. I have also showed you. So you tell me which pattern is this? Out of all the patterns that we see, what is this pattern?
Lepidic.
Lepidic. See, lepidic is growing along the alveolar septa. Okay. So
I think.
yes, very good. This is the acinar pattern. As you can see, they are going in the form of acinus or glands. Okay. So good morning, everyone. I hope my voice is audible to everyone. Yes.
Good morning, sir.
Morning, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, just wait 1 second. So today's topic of discussion is lung tumors. Okay. So this is a very, very interesting topic to understand, and it's a very nice topic and very simple topic to understand, and also very important from exam point of view. So what are we going to understand today while we are reading about the lung tumors? We are going to see little bit of introduction part regarding lung tumors, the epidemiological part. Then we are going to see about the most important part, that is the molecular genetics of lung cancer. It is very, very important because at the level of the hospitals, okay, treatment based on the molecular genetics has already started. Okay, has already started. Then we are going to understand about the basic classification of lung tumors. After that, we are going to understand about the gross and microscopic examination of each type of the tumor. Okay, and then we are going to see the clinical features of lung cancer. Okay, so in general, these are the subheadings that we are going to address today with regards to the lung tumors. Okay. So one very important part over here is that whatever notes I will be sharing this PowerPoint, okay, it is concise, it is not exhaustive, and most important points have been highlighted in bold italics. So you have to, you have to read each and every line of these terms. Okay, cannot be less than this. Okay, so lung cancer, if you will see, if you have read your PARC, that is the PSM, it is the most frequently diagnosed major cancer and also the most common cause of cancer mortality worldwide. Okay, so first we're going to start with the etiology of lung cancer. So as we all understand, we already know that tobacco smoking is the most important etiological factor associated with lung cancer, and 80% of the cases of lung cancer, they are associated with tobacco smoking. Not only the amount of smoking is important, but also the duration of smoking is important. If you will remember, there's something called as pack years. Okay, in PSM you are going to read about this pack years, so I'm not going in details about that. So both the amount as well as the duration of smoking is very important. Okay, but one very important aspect is that although all the lung cancer cases mostly they are associated with tobacco smoking, but remember, out of all the people who are smoking, out of all these smokers, only 10 to 15%, okay, develop lung cancer. Try to understand that important aspect. So it is not that if 100 people are smoking, if there are 100 people who smoke, out of that only 10 to 15 will develop lung cancer. Okay, that is very important to understand. So what is the importance of this line? The importance is that there are other factors other than smoking which is also contributing towards the development of cancer. Very important fact that women who smoke, they are at a higher risk of development of lung cancer as compared to the same amount of smoking done by men. Okay, and not only is the smoker who is smoking, not only he, but also the person who is living with them, they are also affected by that smoking. So whenever you are exposed to passive smoke, that is also dangerous for your health. Okay, passive smoking is also dangerous for your health. Okay, remember, once you stop smoking, the risk of lung cancer is going to come down, but it will never return to like the normal population, okay, or the normal individuals. Okay, and genetically there are certain individuals who are having a different form of this P450 enzyme system, they may have an increased capacity to activate the procarcinogens present in the smoke. Okay, so as a result, these individuals with such variant forms of P450 enzyme system, they are more prone to lung cancer. Why am I stressing on all these points? Because when you are giving your next exams or the AIMS exam, whenever you give, they are taking that all of the following are true regarding tobacco smoking in lung cancer, except. So if you don't understand these individual terminologies, you are not going to be able to rule out those options. So that is why it is very important. And they usually are taking each and every line from Robbins. So it is highly suggested that you go for Robbins. Okay, and if you cannot read Robbins, at least go through the PowerPoints and the notes that I'm providing you. Okay. Now, as I already mentioned that though tobacco smoking is playing a major part in lung cancer causation, there are other, etiological factors associated with lung cancer. Secondly, we are having industrial hazards. All this industrial ionizing radiations or this heavy metals like asbestos, arsenic, they are important cause. But one very important thing that we have to understand, that is with association with asbestos exposure, that asbestos exposure is one of the industrial hazards and occupational lung disease also, which is increasing the risk for lung cancer. And one very bad aspect of this is that the latent period is very high. That is, if you are exposed at this point of time, you are probably going to develop a cancer approximately 10 to 30 years later. So the latent period is also very high. And people who are exposed to asbestos, or among them, the frequency of lung cancer is maximum. Approximately, they are having a 5-fold greater risk of developing lung cancer than non-smoking control subjects, whereas those who smoke and those who are exposed to asbestos, they are having a 55-fold greater risk of development of lung cancer. Okay. The third important feature is the air pollution. Okay, if you remember, if you know, Delhi is one of the most polluted cities in the world, not in India. I'm talking about the world. And if you will understand, if you have noticed, I don't know the exact dates, but in the past week, 2 days, okay, I had read a news that Delhi had gone into a complete lockdown. Now I was suspecting that it might be because of COVID, but no, it was because of pollution. It was because of pollution. 2 days Delhi had to go for a lockdown. Okay, so this air pollution, why am I stating you this? Because they are also one of the causative factors for the causation of lung carcinoma. Specifically, okay, when a smoke combines with the fog, they create something called as a smog, and this is what was reported in Delhi in the past few days. Okay, so air pollution of any form, be it the gasoline or whether it be industrial smoke, okay, they are causing lung irritation, inflammation. Okay, so whenever there will be a chronic inflammation, irritation and inflammation, what is going to happen? Yes, can you tell me how lung irritation, inflammation from air pollution, how they are going to predispose to cancer? Yes, can anyone tell me? Bolo? Yes, anyone? Very simple. If there is a constant irritation, whatever mucosa is there, what is the normal lining of the respiratory mucosa? Yes. What is the normal
Ciliated
lining?
epithelium.
Yes, it is pseudo-stratified columnar ciliated epithelium. Okay, pseudo-stratified epithelium. That is going to change into a squamous epithelium. That is, there is a metaplasia. And if you will remember, metaplasia, if it is persistent over a long period of time, that is going to cause dysplasia. And further on, it is going to cause cancer. Okay, so this is how air pollution can cause. And one very important hazard which is there in our indoors also, that is the presence of radon gas. It also increases the risk of lung cancer. Also, the risk has been increased, and how we are suspecting radon, because increased levels of radon has been found in uranium miners, and these individuals have an increased predisposition to develop lung cancer. Now, the fourth and the most important etiological factor for the causation of lung cancer, if you see, is the molecular genetics. Now, I cannot stress you the importance of molecular genetics, not only for lung cancer, but also for your different other cancers in the body. For example, gastric carcinoma, colon carcinoma, okay, pancreatic carcinoma, okay, cervical carcinoma. So there are so on, okay. So it is very important that you understand the molecular genetics of each and every kind of tumor. Because why it is important? Because now treatment is completely based on the molecular genetics. Even the classification of tumors, if you see, they are now based on the molecular genetics of the individual tumor. So molecular genetics is very important, very much real. So do not skip this part. And I will tell you, those who have not understood the chapter on neoplasia, okay, those who have not understood the chapter on neoplasia, for them it will become very hard and difficult to understand the molecular genetics of each and every chapter. So I am going to advise you to please go back and go through the notes of neoplasia that I have provided, not once, but at least 4 or 5 times, that you get a hang out of it. Then and only then you are going to enjoy the molecular genetics of different types of tumors. Okay. So starting with, so I will just give you now, before I go into the molecular genetics part, just I will give you a fair bit of an idea about the classification system of lung cancers. So this is the entire classification. I'm going to discuss about that, but on on a major basis, if we look at the major categories of lung carcinomas are adenocarcinomas, squamous cell carcinoma, small cell carcinoma, large cell carcinomas, and others. So adenocarcinoma is forming the most common group. So these are the larger groups of carcinomas that we are watching: adenocarcinoma, squamous cell carcinoma, small cell carcinoma, large cell carcinomas, and there are other types of carcinomas which are also there. Okay. So these are the broad categories. Why have I told you about this? Because we are now going to discuss about the molecular genetics, and this becomes very, very important. It can be asked as a long answer question. It can be asked as a short note, and it is very much asked in your MCQs. It is very much asked in your MCQs. So if you look at the molecular genetics of adenocarcinoma, so first try to understand the very important aspect that all carcinomas, whether it be adenocarcinoma, whether it be squamous cell carcinoma, whether it be small cell carcinoma, all of them are associated with smoking. Okay. But remember, adenocarcinoma is the most common carcinoma of the lung that occurs in never smokers. Okay. So see, lung cancers can occur in people who smoke, and it also occurs in small proportion of people who do not smoke. So among the people who are not smoking, in them, adenocarcinoma becomes very common. Now over here, both squamous cell and small cell carcinoma, they are associated with a lot with cigarette smoking. Okay, both of them is having a very high association. And if you have to choose a single one, okay, most or the strongest association with cigarette smoking has been seen for small cell carcinoma. Okay, so don't worry, every point has been given in this particular PowerPoint. Just listen to me what I am telling you now, so you understand how you have to read this PowerPoint. Okay. So if you see over here, so adenocarcinoma, as we have already discussed, it is the most common subtype which is seen in never smokers. So it is not that smoking is not associated with adenocarcinoma. Absolutely, smoking is also playing a role in adenocarcinoma. But among those individuals who never smoke and who are developing lung cancer, in them adenocarcinoma is the most common subtype. Okay. Now, very, very important thing is that around 1/3 of adenocarcinomas, they are having gain of function mutations involving the growth factor receptor signaling pathways. Now, I'm not going into the details of what gain of function mutation is, what growth factor receptor signaling pathways are, because they have been discussed in details in the topic of neoplasia. But over here, what is very important? So if you see, which is the most important gain of function mutation affecting the growth factor receptor, it is the EGFR, epidermal growth factor receptor, is very commonly involved approximately in 10 to 15% of the adenocarcinomas. Okay, it is present in a very high percentage in non-smoking Asian women. Okay, so why this is important, why EGFR mutation detection is important? Because certain treatment drugs like geftinib, okay, they are, or erlotinib, they are actually available for treatment of those adenocarcinoma patients which are positive for EGFR mutation. That is why the molecular genetics becomes very important. Again, we are having those who are having ALK mutation, ROS, RET, MET. These are all rearrangements which are present in adenocarcinoma. So all these mutation names, at least you should remember: EGFR, ALK, ROS, RET, and MET mutation, along with the relative frequencies. Now, some newer additions in the molecular genetics of adenocarcinoma is the presence of mutation in the serine threonine kinases. Especially, they are having BRAF mutation in 2% tumors, and PI3K mutations again in other 2% tumors, and KROS mutation, which is seen in approximately 30% of the tumors. So this is all about the molecular genetics of adenocarcinoma. Okay. Coming to the molecular genetics of squamous cell carcinoma. Now remember, as I told you, squamous cell carcinoma as well as small cell carcinomas, both of them are highly associated with tobacco smoking, but the strongest association has been seen for small cell carcinoma. So if you have to choose one option, okay, that which lung cancer has the strongest association with lung cancer, the answer will be small cell carcinoma more than squamous cell carcinoma. So if suppose this small cell is not in the option, you will go for squamous cell. If, for example, you have multiple options, you can choose multiple options, then both small cell and squamous cell will go into the question. So what are the molecular aspects of this? Very important thing that we have to understand over here is that, okay, very important aspect over here that we have to understand is these losses. So there are losses or deletions of certain genes involving this C3p and 9p. Now this region, okay, this region of chromosome 3 and 9, okay, the short arm of these particular genes, they are harboring a gene called as CDKN2A, okay, and this CDKN2A gene, if you see, it is basically a site which is actually encoding a cyclin dependent kinase inhibitor. It inhibits cyclin dependent kinase. It is an inhibitor of CDK. If you remember, CDK is the one which is allowing the cell cycle to progress, okay, and P16 is an inhibitor of CDK. Okay, so basically, normally they are encoding the CDKN2A, which is nothing but a tumor suppressor gene. How it is a tumor suppressor gene? It is not allowing the cell cycle to proceed. That is how it is a tumor suppressor gene. In squamous cell carcinoma, there is a deletion of this particular portion, that is C3p and 9p. And as a result, because of deletion, this is also not working. This is not synthesized. As a result, the cell cycle continues. So there is uncontrolled proliferation. Okay, so this CDKN2A tumor suppressor gene mutation is present in 65% of the lung tumors will have this particular mutation. Okay. Now, not only this, there is a deletion which is involving 17p also. If you remember, 17p is a site of TP53 gene. And this TP53 gene, if you see, it is a most important and the most studied tumor suppressor gene. So I don't need to say much about this. Okay. So this TP53 mutation, okay, it is seen, it is a very early event, and because it occurs early on in the course, it is reported in 10 to 50% of squamous dysplasia and 60 to 90% of squamous cell carcinoma in situ. So if you all remember, first there is a metaplasia followed by a dysplasia followed by different degrees of dysplasia, which can be mild, moderate, severe dysplasia. That is followed by carcinoma in situ, that is full thickness tumor, and after that you develop invasive carcinoma. So basically the TP53 mutation starts at this level only. Okay, so it is seen in dysplastic epithelium also, as well as in situ carcinomas, and then it is present in majority of invasive carcinomas as well. So any doubts with regarding to the molecular genetics of squamous cell carcinoma? Yes. Pardon, your voice is not clear, is breaking. Can you repeat once again? If you cannot repeat, you can always have an option of typing down your query. Okay. Okay. Going down to small cell carcinoma, the third important variant over here, it is virtually always related to smoking and is having the most strong or having the strongest association with the smoking. So this MCQ I have already discussed. It is having a very high mutational burden and two important tumor suppressor genes of our body, that is TP53 and RB. both of these are inactivated in small cell carcinoma. Okay. Acha, one important thing I forgot to tell you on squamous cell carcinoma, they also have amplification in FGFR1 gene. So over here, you have to speak number one about 3P, 9P, 17P, and thirdly, FGFR1 mutation. These three things you have to speak about in squamous cell carcinoma. In small cell carcinoma, there is a universal inactivation of both TP53 and the RB. Okay, so both of these are most important tumor suppressor gene in our body. So if there is a loss or if there is an inactivation of this gene, so the problem will arise over here. Again, loss of 3P can also occur in nearly all the tumors have loss of 3P. So if you remember, 3P is harboring the tumor suppressor gene CDKN2A, and also this subtype is associated with amplification of genes of the MYC family as well. Okay. Now one question I am going to ask you, not associated with lung tumor. Can anyone tell me which other tumors are associated with mutations of the MYC family? Yes. One is your small cell carcinoma. Yes. Which other mutations? Which other tumors are associated with mutations of the NIC family? NMYC associated with neuroblastoma. Okay. CMYC associated with Burkitt's lymphoma. Yes or no? And also it is associated with bladder cancer. Also associated with bladder cancer. Remember these points. These are important MCQ questions as well. Okay. Now we will discuss something about the lung cancer that is seen in never smokers. Okay. So approximately 25% of all the lung cancer worldwide that occurs, it occurs in never smokers, people who do not smoke. So most of such individuals, they are women. And most of these carcinomas that develop in never smokers are adenocarcinomas, which are having targetable mutations, like we had read about EGFR, ALK, ROS, MET. Okay. Now, one very important thing is that cancers in non-smokers are more likely to have EGFR mutation, and almost they do not have. They never have KRAS mutation. So KRAS mutation is never seen in never smokers. Okay. Just remember these points. Why am I saying again? MCQ point of view, these are very important. They will say you that all of the following are true regarding lung cancer in never smokers, except. So all these parameters will be there. They will give whether they are most commonly seen in women, or most common variant is adenocarcinoma. They are associated with EGFR mutation. So all these points will be given. Then some other point will be given, like they are most commonly seen in squamous cell. So again, that last option, this is the wrong option. Okay. So that is why these points are very important. Now, okay. So what are the precursor lesions of lung cancer? Let us see. So as I told you that lung cancer is basically, it is going from metaplasia to dysplasia to carcinoma in situ. Then there are certain pre-invasive lesions, okay, which is just preceding the development of lung cancer. So basically 4 types of morphological precursor epithelial lesions have been recognized. Okay. These are atypical adenomatous hyperplasia. Okay. These are atypical adenomatous hyperplasia, adenocarcinoma in situ, squamous dysplasia and carcinoma in situ, and diffuse idiopathic pulmonary neuroendocrine cell hyperplasia. Okay, so I will just repeat what are the pre-invasive lesions of lung carcinoma. So this is also one important MCQ that comes, that all of the following are the precursor or pre-invasive lesions of lung carcinoma, except. So these are atypical adenomatous hyperplasia and adenocarcinoma in situ. So these are basically precursors for adenocarcinoma. Squamous dysplasia and carcinoma in situ, they are precursors for squamous cell carcinoma. And diffuse idiopathic pulmonary neuroendocrine cell hyperplasia, that is called as DIPNEC. Okay, these are precursors for neuroendocrine tumors of the lungs. Okay. Okay. So it should be remembered that the term precursor does not imply that each and every one of them are going to progress and form carcinomas. No, it is not like that. Okay. So it might progress, it might not progress. It might remain stable for a long period of time. So I have already discussed the classification of the lung tumors on the broader head, but I am going to tell you certain the classification in details. like adenocarcinoma, squamous cell carcinoma, neuroendocrine tumors, and other uncommon types are also there. So adenocarcinomas, they can have different types of pattern. They can have a lipidic pattern. So what is the lipidic pattern? I'm going to give you a basic idea over here. So for example, this is the alveolus. Okay. If here is the alveolus, this is the alveolus. Okay. Now lipidic means I'm going to, okay, this is the alveolar septa in between. Okay, this is the alveolar septa in between. When I'm saying about a lipidic pattern, okay, when I'm saying about lipidic pattern का मतलब होता है that the tumor is growing along the alveolar septa. That is called as a lipidic pattern. Before it was called as bronchoalveolar pattern of carcinoma. Okay, so that term bronchoalveolar is no more used. We are using the term lipidic. Okay, is it clear? Acinar means when the adenocarcinomas are happening in the form of glands. Okay, that is acinar. Then there is micropapillary, papillary. You know, papilla means what? Papilla means when you have a papilla with a fibrovascular core. Oh, okay, when you have a fibrovascular core and you have papillary structures. Now, this papillary structure can either be big like this or there can be small papillary structures like this. So it can either be micropapillary or papillary. Now, these are all depending on whatever is the pattern of growth of these tumors. Or sometime adenocarcinoma might happen like a solid growth. So for example, you might see that the tumor is actually growing like a solid growth like this. So this is the entire tumor, and there is no pattern as such. So this particular tumor has been involved in this particular fashion. Okay. This is your adenocarcinoma as a solid sheet of growth. Now, there again, adenocarcinoma has one other way of classification, that is, it can be mucinous. That is, the tumor cells might be producing mucus, or it might be non-mucinous variety. It can be non-mucinous. Why we are dividing? Because the mucinous variety is having a worse prognosis compared to the non-mucinous variety. Okay, so we can have an invasive mucinous adenocarcinoma, and we have one entity called as minimally invasive adenocarcinoma. I'm going to clear out all the definitions when I'm going to discuss the morphology part. Then there is something called as minimally invasive adenocarcinoma, which again can be mucinous or non-mucinous variety. In case of squamous cell carcinoma, it can be keratinizing if it is producing keratin, or it can be non-keratinizing, or it can be basaloid. Okay. Now, among the neuroendocrine tumors of the lung, the most important is the small cell carcinoma. Sometimes you will have a combined small cell, means you have a small cell carcinoma. Along with that, you might have a squamous cell or adenocarcinoma. Okay, then you have a large cell neuroendocrine carcinoma. There's a combined large cell neuroendocrine carcinoma can be there. That is, along with the large cell, you have again the squamous cell or adenocarcinoma. That is the combined. Then there is one more tumor, that is the carcinoids. That is the bronchial carcinoid, which might be typical or atypical variety. Other less common types is the large cell carcinoma. Now, this large cell carcinoma is that carcinoma which cannot be placed in any category. Okay, it cannot be called as squamous, it cannot be called as adeno, it cannot be called as neuroendocrine. So it is undifferentiated, where, you know, it is actually a waste basket. Okay, means when I cannot differentiate between the lung tumors, in that particular situation, when no other diagnosis is possible, I am giving the term large cell carcinoma, which I am going to tell you later on as well. Then we have adenosquamous, wherein you, in the same tumor, you have adenocarcinoma along with squamous cell carcinoma. Sometimes you have a sarcomatoid carcinoma. That is not a sarcoma. Now, if you remember, cancers are different, sarcomas are different. But sometimes lung carcinomas can have a look of a sarcomatoid variety, like pleomorphic, spindle cell, giant cell, carcinosarcoma, pulmonary blastoma, like that. Understand? So this is very important. Now, I hope the basic classification of lung tumors is clear to everyone. More will become clear as I'm going to discuss each and every one of them. Okay. So as I already told you that now adenocarcinoma has become the most common lung carcinoma, superseding the squamous cell and small cell, and it is most common in women and as compared to men, and it is the most common form of lung cancer, not only in women but also in men. It has become more. So there are lots of factors. Okay, one factor is that there is an increased amount of women who have started smoking. Because of that, the incidence among women has increased. And also now, because men are more conscious of them looks, so they are using certain filters during smoking because of the because they don't want that their mouth, that the lips become black. So because of that, they are using filters or to decrease the ingestion of nicotine. So all this is changing the morphological type from squamous or small cell to adenocarcinomas. Okay. So as a result, because of this filter tips, remember one thing, that these smoke are now more reaching the peripheral airways. So one very important aspect I will tell you before I go, if this is the particular lung, okay, so adenocarcinomas are more common in the periphery. Okay, adenocarcinomas are more common in the periphery, whereas in the central areas like this, okay, squamous cell carcinoma and small cell carcinomas are more common in the central region. Remember this aspect. This is very important. Okay. Now we are going to start with the morphology of different types of lung carcinomas. I'm going to show you different kinds of images as well. So please pay a lot of attention now. Okay. So lung carcinomas. So I told you right now about the adenocarcinomas. They are arising in the peripheries, and these are arising in the center predominantly. I am using the term predominantly. What do you mean by predominantly? When I am using the term predominantly, what do you understand by it? Yes, can anyone tell me? What do you
Most
understand?
frequently.
Yes, so most frequently. So it means that adenocarcinomas for a major part will occur in the lung periphery. Okay, but one very important part is that it might also occur in the center, but predominantly it occurs in the periphery. This is what I want to tell you. So lung carcinomas might either be in the peripheral part, most often the adenocarcinomas, or in the central or hilar region, most often the squamous cell and small cell carcinomas. Okay. Now, this is one precursor lesion that we had seen, AAH, that is atypical adenomatous hyperplasia. Okay. Now, this is basically a precursor for which carcinoma? For adenocarcinoma. Now, as we look at this particular part, what is this part that I have ticked? What is this part? Yes.
Alveoli.
Very
Alveoli.
good. This is the normal lung alveolus. Now, if you see normally, can you see this? This is the normal alveolar septa that you see. It is very thin. Okay. Now, if you compare this alveolar septa over here, can you see over here? Yes. Can you see? Can you compare with this? If you compare with this over here, the alveolar septal size, the septal size has increased over here. This is the first point you have to notice. Okay, I have proved this point. Also, if you compare, look at the cells lining this part and look at the cells over here. So there is not only there is an increase in number of cells, and they are slightly more hyperchromatic and they are dysplastic in nature as compared to the cells elsewhere. Okay, is this point clear to everyone? Is this point clear to everyone? Okay, Leticia and Bianca, can you hear my voice? Is everything audible to you all? Yes. Leticia and Dr. Bianca, yes, is my voice audible to you all? Okay, good. Chalo. So, okay, so we were here in atypical adenomatous hyperplasia. Okay, so what is the definition? It is a precursor lesion, okay, and the size of which is less than 5 millimeters. So this entire size that we are looking over here, it is looking big because it is magnified. It is less than equal to 5 mm. Okay, so how have we measured this size? So in the microscope, it is possible to measure this size as well. Okay. Okay. Now remember, so what are the points that you have to remember is number one point is there is an increase in the alveolar septal size. Number 2 point, increase in cell number and dysplasia. And number 4 point is less than equal to 5 millimeters. So if in this organized manner, if I remember, and if the diagram is clear in my mind, I can 100% remember this particular definition and I don't have to mug up anything. Okay, clear about atypical adenomatous hyperplasia? Okay. Now
Yes, sir.
we are going to come to another entity that is called, I told you, first there is AAH, another entity is adenocarcinoma in situ. So any kind of carcinoma in situ, what is the meaning of that? It means that the carcinoma, it is just limited by the basement membrane. Okay, so there is a carcinomatous cells over here, here. Okay, they are completely bad. Okay, they are having abnormal nucleus, hyperchromatic. Okay, pleomorphic nucleus is there. They have all features of neoplasia except that they have not entered the basement membrane. Okay, then we use the term in situ, if you remember. Okay, now if this breaks and if it comes over here, then I will use the term invasive carcinoma. Okay, so if you look over here, very important thing is that the size over here is bigger as compared to atypical adenomatous hyperplasia. The size of AIS is less than 3 centimeters and more than 5 millimeters. Okay, this is the first important point. The size is big. Now, if you see these cells, they are completely composed of dysplastic cells which are growing along the alveolar septa. Okay, they are growing along the alveolar septa, and if you see, they are completely dysplastic. Look at the cells over here. They are hyperchromatic. They are having a disordered arrangement. Look at the cells over here. Okay, so they are completely dysplastic. They are growing along the pre-existing alveolar septa, and the dysplasia over here is far more prominent as compared to that seen in atypical adenomatous hyperplasia. Again, they might or might not have mucin. The presence of mucin is just indicating a worse prognosis, as I explained to you before. So this is your adenocarcinoma in situ. Now, next important point. Now, I will tell you one thing. For any carcinoma that you read in the lungs, first you should know grossly where it is located, or grossly what is the picture, what is the microscopic examination, okay, what is the immunohistochemical markers for that, any kind of pre-invasive lesion, if you understand about it, if you know, and we are going to see what is the prognosis of that particular tumor. Okay, so for basically lung tumor, this is very important. Now you all tell me, as I already discussed, that there are various patterns of lung carcinoma. I have also showed you. So you tell me, which pattern is this? Out of all the patterns that we see, what is this pattern?
Lepidic.
Lepidic. See, lepidic is growing along the alveolar septa. Okay. So yes, very good. This is the acinar pattern. As you can see, they are going in the form of acinus or glands. Okay, so this is the most commonly seen pattern of adenocarcinoma, where you can see the gland formation. So this is a classical adenocarcinoma. Okay, okay. Other thing over here, other patterns I have not shown because it is not that much important for you all. It is more important for postgraduate students. Okay, so adenocarcinoma, how it is recognized? By the presence of glandular differentiation or mucin production, which may or may not be there. Different patterns I've already discussed. I'm not going again over here. And I've also told you that adenocarcinomas are more common in the lung periphery. Okay, so it is more common. They are more in the periphery location. Also, what is the immunohistochemical markers? Very, very important. It used to be more important for postgraduate, but in the last 2-3 years, it is being asked in AIMS as well as in the national level exams. Okay, so now it is important that you understand. CQ7, it is the most available marker that we have, but the most important ones are TTF1 and napsin1, napsin A. These are the most important IHC markers. They are also mentioned in my lectures on tumor markers in neoplasia. So you can read from there and here also, but whenever you're writing any answer, so don't forget to mention about the IHC markers. It is not given completely in Robbins. So just remember this part. Now, as I told you, there is a lepidic pattern. So lepidic pattern is that pattern which is going to grow along the alveolar septa. Okay, remember. Now, what is the definition of micro-invasive adenocarcinoma? Let me just clear it out. Tumors which are less than equal to 3 centimeters, but they are having an invasive component. And the proportion of invasive component should be less than equal to 5 millimeter. Remember, this part is very important. Okay, they are called as micro-invasive adenocarcinoma. So why have we differentiated different forms? Atypical adenomatous hyperplasia, then adenocarcinoma in situ, then we are naming minimally invasive, because the prognosis of MIA or micro-invasive adenocarcinoma, it is far better than invasive carcinomas of the same size. That is the major reason that we are having these terminologies, so that we can tell the patient that your prognosis is better or worse. Okay, now can you see this image? This is a immunohistochemistry, and while you do immunohistochemistry, this is the brownish color that you see, which is because of the agent called as DAB. Again, that I'm not going in details of that, but remember over here, basically the tumor marker TTF, this is basically TTF positivity, which is the nuclear positivity. The nucleus is showing positivity, and now we have confirmed it as adenocarcinoma. Okay. Now we are going to the next important carcinoma, that is your squamous cell carcinoma. Okay. Now these are very important terms, and you should by heart these terms, or at least understand what I'm trying to say. It is very common in men, strongly associated with smoking, and most commonly seen in the central part of the lung. So if this is the lung, this is the hilum part, so it will be seen somewhat over here or here. These will be the common location for squamous cell carcinoma. Okay. As I already told you in the molecular aspect of squamous cell carcinoma, that there will be first metaplasia, there will be dysplasia, which might be mild, moderate, severe, followed by carcinoma in situ, followed by the invasive component. Now, if I ask you what type of mutation occurs early on, will you be able to answer? What did I tell you? Do you remember? 3P,
Yes, sir.
9P, CDKN2A, along with that 17, there was P53. Do you remember all these mutations that we have just read? If you can remember, it is a good sign. If you cannot remember, you will have to be more attentive in class. Okay. Okay. So the squamous cell carcinomas, they are preceded by precursor lesions like metaplasia, dysplasia, and then there's a carcinoma that I have already explained. The same thing I have written over here. One very important aspect of this tumor that I'm going to tell you now is that these tumors are highly destructive in nature. So for example, just I will show you with the help of a diagram, so that becomes very clear for you all. I have less space over here, but anyways, I will just show you. Okay, if this is the tumor, okay, and if it is growing along the bronchus, suppose over here, the tumor might grow in such a way that it might completely cause obstruction. It might cause obstruction. So agar obstruction hoga, what is going to happen if the tumor is going to obstruct? What will it lead to? In the previous lecture only I have given this part. What will happen? There will be accumulation of mucus.
Accumulation of the mucus, swelling.
Okay. That is going to predispose to infection, pneumonia. So if an old patient is coming to you with a presentation of pneumonia, always rule out the presence of squamous cell carcinoma in the lung. So imaging study is very important. Here is the correlation that I was talking about in the previous lecture. So this is one thing. Again, this tumor can actually come out. This is the bronchial wall. It can come out of the bronchus over here. Okay. And it might involve the peribronchial tissue around the bronchus, whatever tissue is there. It might cause a lot of destruction, necrosis. So this is very destructive. It can penetrate and it can cause a lot of destruction. It can cause infection. How it can cause, I have already showed you. If you do a bronchoscopy, this tumor, okay, if you, for example, this is the lung again, this is the bronchus, you pass a scope. Under the scope, you will see that it is an exophytic growing outside like this. Exophytic tumor, which is growing along the bronchial lumen, producing an intraluminal mass. So this is how a squamous cell carcinoma presents, and it is basically growing like a cauliflower-like lesion. It is grayish white, firm, hard, with focal areas of hemorrhage, necrosis. It is highly necrotic and destructive. I will show you one image. Now, can you see this particular tumor? Now it is located where? Around in the central part of the lung. Okay, this is the bronchus. If you see the bronchus lining over here, it has already invaded the bronchus. If you can see, it has come out actually. Again, can you see it has also involved the other lobe of the lung? It is grayish white with areas of necrosis, highly destructive in nature. Okay, if you have such a picture, it is classically a squamous cell carcinoma. So it is now clear to everyone how they are growing, and they are growing along the bronchial lumen. They are arising means if this is the bronchus, they are arising over here only like this. Then they are increasing in size. They will, for example, over here, they have completely destroyed the bronchial wall and they are going towards and they are destroying the peribronchial tissues as well. Okay. Is this clear to everyone? The gross image is clear to everyone. So histologically, I will show you with the help of diagram. Now this image, why have I shown it is there in Robbins also. This is a completely normal. And the earliest change that you can see, the basal cells have increased in number. So there is a basal cell hyperplasia. That is the most, or there's the earliest change to occur is a basal cell hyperplasia to occur. Then you are going to see that some form of dysplasia has entered over here. Why am I saying this? Not dysplasia, this is your squamous dysplasia. Now why am I saying squamous dysplasia? Look at the lining cell. What is this cell? Pseudo stratified ciliated. There is a cilia over here, yes or no? Can you
Yes,
see
sir.
any cilia over here? No.
Yes,
So
sir.
these cells have undergone metaplasia to form squamous dysplasia. Crystal clear? No problem. Now once dysplasia has started, now if you see, the dysplasia is now present in the lower third. So this is mild form of dysplasia has started. Then over here the full thickness dysplasia is there. This is the severe dysplasia. And over here, if you see, not only the full thickness has been involved, but also the cells over here, they are having the cells of the characteristics of cancer cells. Yes or no? So this is carcinoma in situ. And if you see over here, but all of them, they are limited by the basement membrane. If you see over here, the cells have now crossed the basement membrane. So this is your invasive carcinoma. Okay. Is it clear now how it is going from metaplasia to dysplasia to carcinoma in situ towards carcinoma? Okay. Clear to everyone? Okay. Now we are moving ahead to the squamous cell carcinoma. I will show you this image, which is very important. What are these?
Keratin pearls.
Very good. These are the keratin pearls. Okay, which is the characteristic. So this is a well-differentiated squamous cell carcinoma. These are the tumor cells. These are the tumor cells actually. And the tumor cells, if you see, they have invaded and entered the stroma, and they are producing a lot of keratin, which is nothing but the keratin pearls. So just the presence of keratin pearls is enough for the diagnosis? No. Under the microscopic examination, you have to see something called as prominent intercellular bridging. Okay, so this is what intercellular. Now, can you see this? This is one cell, and can you see this prominence of intercellular bridging? It is not prominent in normal squamous epithelium. This is called as intercellular bridging. It's like there is a bridging between the two cells. Okay, so these are the squamous cells. If you see, they are having a prominent nucleoli. See the irregular nuclear membrane. So I can say this is a cancer. Okay, can you appreciate prominent nucleoli? This is prominent vesicular nucleoli. Individual cells are different as compared to each other. Some are small, some are big. Okay, some are having two nucleoli, as multiple nucleoli as well. Okay, so these are the cancer cells, cancer squamous cells. Okay, is it clear to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so histologically, what are the points that we have to write? Keratinization is very important. Presence of intercellular bridges is very important. Okay, now remember, now when the squamous pearls are very evident, as from the diagram that I already showed you, in that case they are called as well differentiated squamous cell carcinomas. Now if the squamous pearls are not that much visible, or in very few areas you will be able to see, then it will become moderately differentiated. If it is not at all seen, it is called as poorly differentiated squamous cell carcinoma. Now it is associated with other paraneoplastic syndromes like hypercalcemia. Okay, it is very commonly associated. So it is the most common cancer associated with hypercalcemia is your squamous cell carcinomas of the lung. And it will show cavitation also. It will show cavitation. Now another question I will ask from cavitation: which type of tuberculosis shows cavitation? Which type of tuberculosis?
Secondary tuberculosis.
That means you all are reading. That is a good
Secondary
sign.
tuberculosis.
Good, very good. Okay. So secondary tuberculosis also shows cavitation, and squamous cell lung cancer is also showing cavitation. So this is how you have to correlate and read. And remember, out of all the tumors, the squamous cell carcinoma is having the best prognosis. Why? Because this is growing more slowly and it metastasizes very late. So among all the carcinoma, they are having the best prognosis. Okay. Now, which are the IHC markers? The over here, the CK5 and 6. Always start with CK5, 6 because in our country, like a developing country like India, over here, cytokeratin is the most available marker. So always remember CK5, 6, although they are not the best markers, but they are most available for our country. So always write CK5, 6 first. Other markers which are more specific or which are excellent markers are P40 and P63. And out of them also P40 is the best marker. It is the best marker for squamous cell carcinoma. So it is the most common cancer of the lung associated with Pancoast tumor and lipoid pneumonia as well. Okay. I have shown you the gross image. The microscopic image has been showed. Now we go to the next tumor, that is the small cell carcinoma. As I told you, it is the most malignant, or it's a highly malignant with the worst prognosis, poor prognosis. That is small cell carcinoma, having the maximum relation with cigarette smoking, much more than squamous cell carcinoma. And again, just like squamous cell, it is present in the central or in the hilar region. Okay. Now it is the most aggressive of all the lung tumors that I have already told you. And the cells that we see is like the small round blue cells that we see. These are neuroendocrine in nature. These are neuroendocrine in nature, and they look very much like lymphocyte, except the fact that they are approximately 3 times the size of a normal small resting lymphocyte. They are 3 times the size of the normal small lymphocyte. Okay, they have a salt and pepper nuclear chromatin. Okay, salt and pepper nuclear chromatin. These are all features of any neuroendocrine tumor. They have salt and pepper, open chromatin, finely granular chromatin. They have ill-defined cell borders. They are having ill-defined cell borders. Okay. Okay. Now these are small cells with very scant cytoplasm, ill-defined cell borders, finely granular chromatin, salt and pepper chromatin is there. And very important is the presence of nuclear molding. Now, what is the meaning of this? So for example, if a nucleus is lying down over here, another nucleus is going to take the shape of this. This is called as nuclear molding. Okay. Let me just show you this diagram. Can everyone appreciate this? This is the small round blue cell tumor. Now the cells are not always round. Sometimes the cells are also oval shaped. Can you appreciate, everyone? Yes. Now I'm going to show you one thing over here and ask you what is that. Let me myself search. It is not very clear in this image, else I would have shown. Can you see over here something? What is this? Can you appreciate what is this? Yes, this is nuclear molding. It is not that very much clear, but can you appreciate over here? Everyone, can you appreciate? This is the classical picture of small round blue cell tumor. Now I will show you another diagram. Yes, over here. Can you appreciate now? More clearly? Can you appreciate now? Everyone, yes, what is nuclear molding? So if in the exam, because it is more visual based now, if you see this diagram, you should be able to understand what these are. Now, one important thing that we see over here in case of small cell carcinoma, it is called as Azopardi effect. Okay. So what is the meaning of this effect? So for example, if this is the blood vessel, okay, around that, what happens that whatever cells are there, they undergo necrosis. Okay, so necrosis is very common and quite extensive in small cell carcinoma. So when they die, they leave behind the DNA material. And this DNA material, it gets deposited along the blood vessels, along the walls of the blood vessels. And what is the color of the nucleus or the nuclear material? Yes, it is blue in color. So this is called as Azopardi effect or Azopardi effect. Let me just show you with the help of this diagram. Can you appreciate? This was an important AIMS question. Here is the central blood vessel. And if you see, because of lot of necrosis, the DNA has completely encrusted the walls of the blood vessel. This is called as Azopardi effect, which is classical feature of small cell carcinoma of the lung. Clear to everyone? What is Azopardi effect and what are the clinical, what are the features? Okay. Azopardi effect I have already discussed. I have already discussed what is combined small cell carcinoma. Now, electron microscopy. Now, these features are true for any of the neuroendocrine tumors. Any neuroendocrine tumor anywhere in the body, they will show by electron microscopy, they are going to reveal dense core neurosecretory granules. Okay. And immunohistochemistry markers over here is the chromogranin, synaptophysin, CD56, neuron-specific enolase. So these are the 4 important neuroendocrine markers which are positive for any neuroendocrine tumor. But there are certain very important markers of small cell carcinomas of the lung. Approximately 85% of small cell carcinoma is also showing TTF1 expression. Now, which other lung tumor is also showing TTF1 expression? Yes?
Adenocarcinoma.
Very good. Fantastic. Adenocarcinoma is also showing. So remember one thing. If you are asked a question that which lung tumor is expressing TTF1, your answer, if you have to choose any one, should be first adenocarcinoma. If adenocarcinoma is not there in the option, then you are going to go for small cell carcinoma.
Small cell carcinoma.
Okay, if it is not there in the option. If you have multiple choice, choose both of them. Is it clear now? With regards to TTF, now around 90% cases are also showing BCL2 expression. Now, what is BCL2? Does anyone remember what BCL2 is? Let me see.
Factor.
What?
Anti-apoptosis.
Very good.
Anti-apoptotic.
This is an anti-apoptotic factor. Very good. See, look at the 5-year survival rate of this tumor. Is how much? Is only 5%. Is only 5%. So think how much bad this tumor is, having the worst prognosis. Now, small cell carcinoma, it is the one which is maximally showing. It is the one which is maximally showing ectopic hormone production or paraneoplastic syndrome. So the most common lung cancer associated with paraneoplastic syndrome or with ectopic hormone production is small cell carcinoma. And which are the paraneoplastic syndrome associated over here? Syndrome of inappropriate diuretic hormone secretion, SIADH, because of excessive secretion of ADH from the tumor. Cushing syndrome because of excessive ACTH secretion, and hypercalcemia. But hypercalcemia is rare with a small cell. Which other lung tumor is maximally associated with hypercalcemia? Which is the MCQ? Squamous cell carcinoma. So all these points are, though they are very easy, they are very much confusing. So I have made it very clear for you people with this particular PowerPoint. Okay. Now, also one thing, though they are having a worse prognosis, they are the most responsive to chemoradiotherapy. Now, why I am telling you these points? Because now you have clinical based questions. And in the clinical based question, they will use such lines that this is so and so patient having a very good response to this, have a relapse or a metastasis. So when they speak that they were responsive to chemoradiotherapy, they are giving you a hint that this was a small cell carcinoma. Understand? And this small cell carcinoma of the lung is also the most common carcinoma to be associated with SVC, a superior vena cava syndrome. It is a compression of that vessel. Because of that, there's a problem. So I'm not going to details of that again. Okay. Now we come to the next tumor, that is the large cell carcinoma. Now, large cell carcinoma, it is a tumor or it is a diagnosis of exclusion. When I am not being able, even with the help of immunohistochemistry. So, for example, I have given CK7, I have given TTF, napsin, I have used CK56, I have given P40 in my panel, I have used P63, then I have used all the neuroendocrine panel also. If all these panel come out to be negative, then what to do? What should I label it as? Then they are labeled it as these are undifferentiated malignant epithelial tumor lacking any features of any other form of carcinoma. They are of diagnosis of exclusion. They are not going to express any marker which is specific for any well-defined lung carcinoma. So this point is very important. Morphologically, these tumors, they are very large with prominent nucleolus and moderate amount of cytoplasm. That is why the term large cell carcinoma was there. Now, if this large cell carcinoma, if it is expressing the markers of neuroendocrine markers, agar wo express karta hai, if it is expressing the neuroendocrine markers, then we will call it as large cell neuroendocrine carcinoma. Understand? If a large cell carcinoma expresses neuroendocrine markers, then we call it as large cell neuroendocrine tumor. Now, can you see these tumors? These are large cell carcinoma. Now remember, this is large cell carcinoma. Why? Because all the IHC markers for adeno, for squamous cell, for neuroendocrine markers, all these came out to be negative. That is why we labeled. Now, for example, any tumor, whether it be adenocarcinoma, squamous cell, they, at the very end stage, they can become highly anaplastic and they can become in this form. They can present in this form. So even with this presentation, if they are napsin positive, then we will call it as adenocarcinoma positive. If this same tumor, if it is P40 positive, I will call it as squamous cell carcinoma, provided P40 positivity is there. Understand this aspect, what I am telling you. So remember, it is not important that the morphology or the histological picture is not important. What is important is it should be negative by IHC. Okay, that is very important because such presentation can be there with any other tumor in the end stage or in the higher stage. Okay. Now, combined, I have already told you what is the meaning of combined. They are constituting 4 to 5% of all the lung carcinoma. Now, coming to the distant spread, how these cancers are spreading. They are spreading by both the lymphatic and the hematogenous route, and they spread very early, except the squamous cell carcinoma, which are metastasizing late. That is the reason they are having the best prognosis out of all the tumors. Now, metastasis may be the first manifestation of an underlying occult pulmonary lesion. And remember, no organ is spread. If you have to choose one option, that is the most common site of involvement, they are the adrenals. The other sites are the liver, 30 to 50%, brain, and the bone. Now, the major presenting complaint is cough. Most common is cough, weight loss, chest pain, and dyspnea. Now, you must be thinking that, sir, in movies, they show that whenever someone has a lung cancer, in Bollywood movies especially, they will show that there is hemoptysis. Yes or no? Do you
Yes, sir.
see any hemoptysis anywhere in this option? So whenever hemoptysis is there, do not think lung cancer. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It happens, but very less frequently. If a history of hemoptysis is there, which other lesion will you think about? Hemoptysis is there? Yes. Very good. TB. TB is one case which classically presents with hemoptysis because of the involvement of some vessel. I forgot name of that, and anatomy that is taught very importantly. So remember, hemoptysis is more common with TB. Okay. Cough, weight loss, and if these options are not there, this is actually most commonly asked question, chest pain. Okay. Okay, we have discussed about this, and this is the last slide for today's lecture, where I've just given all the paraneoplastic syndromes which are associated with all the different types, like SIADH with ADH, okay, Cushing syndrome with ACTH release, parathormone-related peptide release, so it leads to hypercalcemia. There might be hypocalcemia as well, gynecomastia, carcinoid syndrome, Lambert-Eaton syndrome, peripheral neuropathy, acanthosis nigricans, leukomoid reactions, hypercoagulable states, and hypertrophic pulmonary osteoarthropathy. All these are different paraneoplastic syndromes which are associated with lung carcinoma. So with this, I have completed the topic of lung cancers. I hope you all have understood this topic in details. If you have any doubt, you can ask me at this point of time.